Hey, my name is Nicole. I am a college student studying creative writing and secondary English education, and you are watching the first episode of YA Wise, a hub for parents and readers to talk about YA fiction. So you may ask, what is that? What is this? Great question. YA Wise is going to be a series of videos I'm doing about YA and middle grade fiction, where I sort of examine their literary as well as moral merits. I'm doing this because I felt like as a young reader, I was very much dissuaded away from the books that I wanted to read, which were sort of modern, current YA, in favor of more sophisticated novels. So, as an education and creative writing student, I have gained more appreciation for these works of classic canon literature, and can definitely see what merits they possess. I still think it's important to acknowledge the great things that are in YA. And so my goal here is to help parents and teachers and whoever kind of take a deeper look at some works of YA that I personally enjoy, in hopes that then you can have conversations with your adolescents, and so preteens, teens, whoever's reading it, because I think a lot of them do present great moral lessons that, that should not be overlooked. So, they're full of strong young women who learn important things and work with others and set and accomplish goals. That, these are the types of things that we want our adolescents to be seeing and doing. And so why not work through the things that they already love and want to have in front of them in order to hopefully teach some great lessons, but also cultivate a lifelong love of learning. Okay, we're gonna start with just sort of a definition of what is YA literature. And the truth is, it's hard to say. So, just as sort of the term young adult doesn't necessarily apply to a certain specific age range of, all right, when you turn 13 and you will become a young adult, and then when you are 25, you stop being a young adult. It's very fuzzy, and it's because it's a relatively new term. We really don't see sort of this recognition of the adolescent period until about the 50s, post-Great Depression, post-World War II, as there started to be more workers than there were jobs, and so there was less need for children to go straight into working, and so causing sort of that stark contrast between you are a child and now you have a job and you are an adult, and you're responsible for yourself. And so with those changes at that period, there's increases in high school and college enrollment and graduation, and sort of this period develops in life of fuzzy in-betweenness. And so, since it's a relatively new term, everybody sort of has this different definition of it. And I think that that's probably going to continue to be something that's hard to nail down. But going forward, people are just gonna keep talking about when do I stop being a young adult? And when do I just become an adult? I'm 21, I don't know. So, but looking at YA specifically, trying to look at, okay, what is the audience range for young adult literature? And again, the answers are just sort of all over the board. One author says it's aimed at those under the age of 25, but is suitable for anyone who's interested. Another gives a range of 12 to 18, 10 to 25, or 12 to 34. So, sort of the general idea is sort of those teenage, early, maybe later 20s, and then I'll also be discussing middle grade fiction, which is sort of that period just before, which that one's pretty well defined as about 3rd through 8th grade is going to be more middle grade fiction. So that sort of whole bubble of, is what we're going to be looking at here. So, the contents of YA literature it's about pacing and moving quickly and straightforwardly through a story. I've got some quotes and summaries here from other writers, people who finished their degrees, who know more than me. It focuses on vulnerable young characters dealing with emotions and experiences. It reflects on issues and conflicts most relevant to teens. So, looking at that teenage experience and what are the experiences that they're going through, both realistically and sort of sometimes some interpretation. Most of the books I'm going to be looking at here focuses on princesses, so, you know, that's not necessarily a common teen experience or young experience to be a princess or to undergo princess training. That is my specific little niche for these first few videos. But themes of friendship and school and figuring things out with your parents, like those are all common themes that as an adolescent you're dealing with, and then getting to see that through the characters is an important key feature of YA literature. It usually focuses on a teenage protagonist and approaches problems from a teenage perspective. YA is commonly written in the first person and is describing the initiation into the adult world. One specific quote: "It must have a climactic epiphany of new maturity as the subtext and be told in the YA voice from the limited adolescent viewpoint." So that early life stages of beginning to understand the world and learning to navigate it is very key to YA. However, this accessibility, does not equal a dumbing down of these works. As we have argued already, young adult literature focuses on books worthy of the same kind of sustained analysis as the classics. So that is a quote from Jonathan Austein and Rachel Wadham in their essay, Young Adult Literature and the Common Core, a surprisingly good fit, which was published in the American Secondary Education Journal. So that's what I'm trying to do here, is I want to give these books some of the same attention that we do give to more classic literature, to see what's in them so that we know, right? I think it's important to recognize and analyze the things that our young people are partaking in. So, YA literature meets teens where they're at better than older or more lofty works, but it also engages and stimulates their brains and sort of involvement better than like TV or movies, video games, because while those things can also sort of present some of these same lessons, books are a little bit more of a traditional sense, and there is some extra learning, and it helps build these critical thinking skills in a way that's different and can be more applicable to the real world, sort of outside of young adolescent life. So, YA books employ literary elements of the classics. They engage adolescent students in analyzing literature among themselves and their peers, and it promotes and encourages lifelong reading habits. So those are kind of three main goals that we see in YA literature. And yeah, YA literature does have lots of the same themes that we find in these classic works. And so another thing that I'm going to do here is help to connect some of these books to more classic, time-tested works of literature that continue to help develop your child's thinking. I have done a lot of research and seen a lot of research on how YA literature can be worked into the classroom and help build into these bigger works and to prepare students to think and discuss about them, because they start out with a perspective that they understand, and then they can apply it to these other books that are a little bit more complicated, that are a little more separated from their own world. And YA does a great job of bridging that gap. So engagement is the first step towards literary appreciation. It's important to be engaging with these texts and not just having children read them and kind of move on from them, but to really think about them as works of literature. The first book that I'll have up here is Princess Academy, which is the first book that I remember reading and not just being like, oh, I enjoy reading, I like getting lost in a story and just like devouring, but really thinking about the things that were in that book of like, oh, like this is a really good book, and like the prose in this is very nice. Obviously I was not using the words prose because I was an elementary student, but like, I like the way that this is written, and I like the things that are in this, and kind of thinking about it more deeply, which is important to build those critical thinking skills and, yeah, lifelong important things to know how to do. Yes, so I'll walk you through some more of that research as we go on through this first video, but also, if you have questions, I'll try and find a way to kind of connect all my resources that I've got, that I've accumulated, so that you can have them. Alright, so I want to take a second here to just kind of run you through what to expect from each episode, so that you know what information is Nicole going to give me, what information do I need to know things beforehand. Also, each video will be broken into some sections, so that hopefully you'll be able to look through and be like, okay, I'm looking specifically, I just want to know the summary, or I just want to know what lessons did Nicole find in this book. So, tell you what all those things are, give you some information about them and sort of my process in researching them, as well as, I don't know, any helpful thoughts I have, I guess. So we'll start off each video, I'll give you the bare basics of the title, the author, publishing date, publisher, sort of the bare minimum of what is this. And then give you a little bit more information in the next section, talk about the author and their background, if they have any interesting other work to look at besides this book, important things you should know about their lives that has influenced their writing and their perspective, give you a good synopsis of each book, just covering main events, main characters, so that you know what's going on if you have not had a chance to or don't plan to read the book, though I would encourage read along with your kids. It will encourage discussion and help make that a little bit better for both of you. I'll present any awards that this book has won, just so you know sort of how it exists in the world and what the public perception is. Also, talk a little bit about different ratings that you have, both from Goodreads, which I've found tends to be a little bit more of a literary rating, talking about the quality of the story as itself, and then ratings from Amazon, which sometimes are a little more superficial, just like, yeah, my kid likes this book, without really discussing what's inside of it. But also, Amazon, I think, reaches a different audience than Goodreads does, right? Because Goodreads is specifically, tends to be more intense readers, whereas Amazon is a little more the general public. I'll also kind of give you my personal assessment of this book of the writing's okay, but it's a fun story, or no, this is really beautiful, and yeah, recommend this to everyone. So that sort of assessment, a little bit what I think about it. And then I'll break down the recommended age level for each book, which the main systems I'm going to be using for that is AR scores and ATOS scores. So those are pretty commonly used systems of assessment within schools. So I wanted to give you guys some information on what those things mean, because I know I've seen those numbers in sort of my own academic career and preparing, but I didn't necessarily know what they mean. So I've done that research for you. So AR Scores is Accelerated Reader. It's a system used by many schools to help parents and students find books appropriate for the student, obviously. So each book has a test that goes with it that assesses reading comprehension, that has, as you answer questions correctly, you get points. Students are usually given a goal for how many points they are recommended to earn in each section throughout the year or quarter. This is the system that my elementary school would use, and everybody would have a slightly different goal based on kind of their level of reading and interest, and it was a very great adaptable system, I found. So the Accelerated Reader uses two different scores. They have an interest level scores, which is determined by the publisher as well as some of their own professionals, that just looks at content-wise, what's in this book, who's gonna find these things interesting. And then they have the AR score, which is based off of content material, or the AR professionals for the interest level. It's based off like content, material, themes, characters, plot, those kinds of things. And then there's the ATOS book level, which is a numerical assessment where you get usually like not a 2-digit, but like a number and a decimal, and yes. So like a 4.5. And so then that first number before the decimal point is the grade level. So in this case, 4th grade. And then 0.5 is the month within that school year. So this would be the 5th month of 4th grade would be where this hypothetical book would be recommended for reading based off of sentence length, punctuation, word length, more mechanical things that they look at. They've got a formula to do. It also has to do with the difficulty of the test that goes along with it. So those two scores, the interest level and the ATOS score, do not always match, so it's important to see both of them, which they don't always necessarily need to match. I was the kind of kid who had a 6th grade like reading score, like the ATOS score of, yeah, I can comprehend big words and sentences, but as a, elementary school student, I didn't need to be reading books meant for 6th graders. I didn't find those books interesting. I was like, yeah, there's too much romance. I'm in 4th grade. I don't want that. So it's important to see both of those things so you can know how they apply to your student, sort of wherever they fall in that range. And then the Lexile scores is the other main system of assessment that I've looked at. They do not have as much information out there, so I did have a little bit of trouble figuring that one out, as well as I don't have as much personal experience with it. It seems like they're rated a number between 100 and then 1700. So they don't break down based on like specifically grade levels. It just, as the number gets higher, the book is more difficult. So they have some charts out on their website that you can see, like, okay, the average 4th grader would be about this score by the end of 4th grade, or in the middle of 4th grade about here, but this score does a better job, I think, of being accessible to sort of readers at any point of, okay, if you start out here, here's where we want to see you grow by the end of the year, even if, your starting point is higher than where your other classmates may be, still encouraging growth within that time, which is super awesome. They also sometimes have letter codes that go with those numbers. So they have AD, which is adult directed. So these are books that are comprehensible to a younger audience, but maybe is better if read with an adult. So having a parent or a teacher read them aloud, rather than reading them independently, to ask a couple more opportunities for discussion, questions, hear maybe how some bigger words are read, things like that. So NC non-conforming, so that's good for high ability readers who need age-appropriate content. So that was kind of my experience of, well, I can read this book about Abraham, the Booth brothers who assassinated, well, only one Booth brother assassinated Abraham Lincoln, but also maybe I don't need to carry around that giant book as a small child. It felt really cool though. And then there's also HL, which is high-low, so these are good for older students who need material that are less complex at a lower reading level, so sort of the inverse of that, of a little bit more complex subject matter at a lower, like, grammatical level, just to meet everybody where they need to be. GN, graphic novel. They have BR, beginning reader. Oh, so that's appropriate for emerging leaders below 0. They have NP, non-prose, so things like plays, poems, songs, recipes, anything like that. But they really do stress that they have norms, they don't necessarily have benchmarks. The scores are derived from the indications from longest sentence and the types of words that are used in the book. And so within this, I will also include my own assessment of, hey, heads up, here's sort of a major event that may be more contently challenging. There's one that is like, hey, there's some adults in this that behave very poorly to these children, and so parents should be aware of that, like that is the content material that is presented within that. Right, our next section that we'll work into is the characters. So I'll outline sort of the main characters within each book, what their interests, motivations are, their relationships with each other. I'm going to focus mostly on the adolescent characters, though obviously the adults within these books play key roles. You can't really have books just focusing on kids without having at least some sort of influence from adults. That's just generally how the world works. So I'm aiming to focus on their development throughout the book, their key characteristics, and then again, like I said, their relationships. I find that it's incredibly important to examine the way that teens and young people are depicted in the media. I think that sometimes the media does not do us justice. That, you know, teens are shown to be, oh, they're just hormonal and moody and irrational, more interested in their friends and their phones or whatever. But I don't know that these things are true. My experience as an adolescent, around adolescence, studying to become a teacher of adolescents, is that young people have really great things to say, and they are more aware of the world than we give them credit for. And so to write them off, especially in media specifically directed to them, I think is a huge disservice. And so also as adults looking at this, I think that it can also bring a new light to, like, oh yeah, teens can be really good problem solvers, and like they can address complex issues. They're just gonna do it in the way that's right for them, which that's what everyone does, right? We approach problems in the way that works best for us. And so adolescence is no different in that. So YA fiction addresses teens and adolescents as complex, and they're mature, and of course they're changing, and so sometimes, yeah, you're gonna be hormonal and moody and irrational. That's just part of life. So YA can be used to introduce some pretty difficult conversations, especially those about race and bullying and other social issues, in a way that is accessible to a younger audience and can be used in the household or in classrooms. Studies show that when students read books with a diverse cast of characters and see them work together in a way that is productive, they are more likely to engage a diverse group within their own life and have more positive relationships with people who are not the same as them. So having these relatable characters across the board makes these lessons in these books more impactful. So that's really what I'm looking to focus on in that section, as well as kind of give you the names that you need to know as you're talking about these books. All right, and then the next section that's sort of the meat of the project is looking at the lessons within each book. So each book I've pulled out, I think, about 3 lessons that we see either children in the book learn, or that can kind of be extrapolated from their experiences. And then give you some tools to address and discuss that together as a family or as a classroom or however you're using this. So, like I said, in my other sections where I've started to present some research, it's a very effective way of presenting lessons. Because when you can see yourself in a character, you're more likely to relate and learn lessons with them. The research shows things like fairy tales, stories with magic can be particularly impactful with teens in a unique way because of the transformational nature of these types of stories. And teenage life, there's a lot of transformation going on, both physically but also socially, economically. Like, you're moving, it's a period of transition of You're no longer a child. You're not quite an adult. You're in this limbo in between that you are becoming something new. And so seeing that in these books is very impactful, very relational, can improve self-image, self-worth, which is super duper awesome, right? It can discuss themes of power in ways that are very clear and understandable at the adolescent level. Studying YA increases empathy in a plethora of settings from elementary to college. I've seen research on that. Yeah, so YA it's a great tool for teaching and learning lessons. That's why it's great if we think about them and put them together. And then with each section, I will also have some specific research to do with that. Okay, this book talks about friendships and the importance of maintaining friendships. So here's some research that kind of shows what happens at the adolescent level when you're not maintaining friendships, or what impact does friendship have on the adolescent development and brain, and cool sciencey things to go with these books, because while we are reading them for pleasure, because it's fun sometimes to read about princesses and palaces and magic and fancy dresses, they also, have these important things to say about the value of friendship and family and education and being able to speak up to power and to make important judgments about, your own beliefs and developing your own beliefs and standing up for yourself. And so all of these things can be seen in these books. They're not just frivolous books. So that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna look at that, some specific lessons within them, and a lot of them have overlapping lessons, so I've done my best to pick out different ones for each book, but also you may be like, oh yeah, in the book about Princess Academy, Nicole talked about family connections, but that also shows up in this other book, and so they're cross-applicable, which is super duper cool. So, and then we'll end out each episode with some opportunities for further thinking. So I've come up with a couple discussion questions or kind of discussion topics from each book related to the character's experience, as well as the lessons that I've presented, just to help engage discussion and digest these books together, because that's really what's going to help them stick, is to talk about them and learn about them together. Also, it's just interesting to hear what kids have to say, because they do have really cool, interesting, deep thoughts that you're like, all right, cool. That as a family would be great to hear and talk about, of okay, let's talk about the themes of what does it mean to be a good person, or how should families communicate, and what does it mean to be different from your family, to help you engage in that discussion moving forward. And yeah, research backs that up, but when you talk about it, things stick better. So, and then I will present a couple other books that are most of the time similar reading levels on that AR-ATOS Laxile scale. But also share maybe some of those same important lessons or themes, or sort of just feel, and these books are going to be more of sort of drifting towards or within the canon of literature, because it is important to read those books and to know them, and also have opportunities to talk about them and think about them and see what's in them. And so I think using these YA books as an introduction to that is a really great way to inspire a deeper connection with reading, especially together as a family. The writing quality of them does tend to be more consistent. There's a couple of books that we're going to look at within this that it's a fun story. It has some issues writing-wise, which all of these books I read and I enjoyed, and so not putting any of them down, but some of them, it's alright, cool. That's maybe not gonna stand the test of time the same way that Little Women will, but it's still fun, it's still accessible, it's still meaningful, right? So we're all about not writing those off, but using them as to bridge the gap between where your adolescent already is to new learning and deeper reading ability. Yeah, that's what we're gonna look at here. I'm really excited.